So on the agenda today, we want to talk about the number one reason that we're all here, and that is the announcement from Microsoft about the end of life for Dynamics GP. So we're going to talk about what dates you need to be concerned with, and we're going to talk about what does it look like to stay on GP, and what does it look like to move to Business Central. And then at the end, we will have some time for questions. Before we get started, one more poll. What was the birthplace of Great Plains? Winnipeg, Fargo, Barnesville, or New York? Where was Great Plains started?
And I hope they get this one, Leanne. I hope they get this one.
I do too. Okay, responses are coming in. Awesome. Let's see. Ooh, again, all across the board. But the winner is Fargo, North Dakota, 1981. And it was not started by Doug Burgum. It was, I can't remember his name, but it was started by someone else, and Doug Burgum came on a few years later. Okay, so Dynamics GP end of support. What I've got on this slide, I won't go into depth right now, but there's Microsoft's announcement, and we put a link to the actual blog so that you can go in and read it, as well as what does end of support mean. And this is a blog from Stoneridge Software talking about extended support and what that means. I'm keeping you very engaged. What year did Microsoft purchase Great Plains? So it was started in 1981 in Fargo. What year did Microsoft decide that they wanted to purchase Great Plains? I remember this announcement very clearly because there was a lot of fear and concern in the Great Plains community because we didn't know at that point how Microsoft or what they were going to do with an ERP software, because that was not their area of expertise. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay. Again, a lot of interesting answers. The correct answer is 2001 is when Microsoft officially purchased Great Plains. So let's talk about the key dates. As we learned, Great Plains was started in 1981. So it has been around for 43 years. Microsoft is committed to product patches and enhancements until September 30th of 2029. If you are using payroll, Canadian or US payroll, the last update that you will receive is the year end of 2028, and that's for your payroll taxes and 1099 changes. So there will be no more payroll updates in 2029. April 30th of 2031 is when the last potential security patch will be released. So there will be no security patches released after 2031. As we go through what some of your options are, we strongly recommend that, Microsoft has given us good notice. That's 5 to 7 years for you to plan your migration. So we strongly recommend that over the next few years, depending where you are in your journey, that you plan to focus on migrating to Business Central before that April 30th, 2031 date. I'm very curious for this answer. How long has your organization used GP? You have 4 buckets: 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 15, or 16 plus. I'm curious if we have anyone attending this call that's in that 16 plus category. Okay, and I'll give you a few more seconds. Wow. Wow. That speaks volumes. So 55%, 16 plus years. That is a long time. So that ties right into, what are your options? Your first option is you can do nothing. You can stay on GP and keep using it. Of course, that would not be what we would recommend, just because you've been using GP. It's been around for 43 years. Another 5 years, it puts it at 48 years. It's an awesome product. It's served its purpose, but its age is starting to show. You might want to stay on GP for the next few years because maybe you're not quite ready yet to move to Business Central, and there could be several reasons for that. You might be using a particular ISV product, or you might have some complex integrations that you're running with different line of business applications, and you need some time to navigate and document and prepare. So what we can do in that case, if your infrastructure is nearing end of life, rather than have you invest in new hardware to extend the life of GP while you prepare for your migration to Business Central, we can help you migrate your solution over to Azure. Twofold. It gets your users used to using GP in a cloud-based environment, plus it gives you that time to plan and prepare in a secure environment in the cloud so that you continue using GP until you're ready. And your third option, of course, is planning and studying what your migration to Business Central will look like. And I'm going to turn it over to Corey, and he's going to talk a little bit more in depth about what these options look like.
All right. Thanks, Leanne. So I think before we get started on my part, I really kind of like these polls because it, I don't know, it doesn't make light of the situation we're dealing with here, because this is a very important topic, but it just kind of helps remind us how long GP's been around and how long we've all worked with it. And so the first question is another poll that won't pop up on the screen, but as we go here, just type down in the message or the chat what you most love about GP and what, like, your favorite features or something like that. All right, so what does it look like staying on GP? And Leanne's covered a few of these items already. We understand that now might not be the right time for you, whether that's because the cost of migrating to something new is too high, or some of your ISVs aren't compatible yet with Business Central, or you need more time to take into account all of the different items that are working in conjunction with Great Plains, or maybe you have some folks that work there at your company that might be retiring soon, and you want to wait till after they leave before you make a decision and move to Business Central. So the same benefit, some of the benefits that you're going to see are, you're familiar with GP, you've spent a lot of time getting it ready, making it work the way you want it, it's reliable, plus you still have the great support folks here at Stoneridge Software that are going to continue to help you as you do the transition. Some risks: you have to deal with continually unsupported hardware, unsupported operating systems. Eventually they're going to be out of date and you're going to need to update them. The limited ability to scale with an on-premise system and access it externally if you don't have the right person on staff, making it accessible outside the network can be difficult. And plus, you're not able to take advantage of all the new features and functionality that you'll see in something like Business Central with AI and automation. I've got a note here. Oh, must still be working. So anyway, and then kind of the main one is security. So as you're moving along and you're transitioning, you're going to run into some security risks that come about because you're on an old, outdated system. So making sure that you stay up to date on newer hardware and newer operating systems is key, because eventually GP won't be supported on some of those operating systems or hardware setups. So when that time comes, you're opening yourself up to more vulnerability than what we would like to see. So just keep that in mind as you're making decisions as to how long you're going to stick with GP. All right. Next, we got another poll coming up. What version of GP was SmartList Designer first included in? This was a tough one. A lot of times what folks will use is SmartList Builder. And so that was inside of Great Plains initially from E1. Then it transitioned back out to E1, and then Microsoft released SmartList Designer in this version so that it could have an option for you to create those custom smart lists. All right, we'll move here and see what we've got. All right, the most guesses were GP 2010, but the actual answer is GP 2013 R2. So close. Okay, so the next one, what option that Leanne mentioned is, what does it look like to stay on GP in Azure? So in this scenario, your hardware and stuff is probably getting old and you don't want to purchase new hardware, and you kind of want to get to the next step before you transition fully to Business Central. So an Azure option or Azure migration is a way to buy yourself some time to continue to work with GP on newer infrastructure, newer hardware, newer operating systems, so that you don't have to worry about your old operating system on-prem. The benefits of this is it gives you time to evaluate a transition to Business Central and gives you more time to plan. You'll kind of see a familiar bullet point again. We're going to continue to help you, guide you along the way, and support you as needed here at Stoneridge. The system is more scalable than it is for having an on-premise solution. It's supported and updated, and in Azure, we have a team here that's going to manage them monthly and make sure the patches are applied properly. It's accessible again, so it's more accessible than an on-prem solution. And again, security. So Microsoft, of course, has its own Azure options inside that you'll be using that make an Azure system with GP on it more secure than keeping it on-premise. The risks that go along with it are you're prolonging the change. You're just kind of buying yourself time, and it could get you into a rut there where you're like, oh, this is kind of working here, Corey. We're not quite ready to move yet. But so it does buy you time, but again, it puts you in that column where you could risk keeping it in there too long and then run into some security vulnerabilities. At the end of 2029, there aren't going to be any more functionality updates or features in GP, so you're still having that risk. Whereas if you were to move to Business Central, you're getting into that modern solution where Microsoft is spending a lot of their development time and making sure things are working for you. And you're like, one of the main things that you get to take advantage of is Copilot and AI. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here next. So Stoneridge has a couple of different offerings for you guys if you did want to move to Azure. So at the end, we'll talk about visiting with your CSM and going through some assessments so that you can kind of look towards what options in Azure might work best for you. All right. Has anyone here ever had a reports dictionary error? I'm going to say, if you answer no, then you probably haven't been using GP. These are one of the errors that we commonly have to help people fix after a year-end update. That doesn't seem, no matter how you go through it, it still seems to break even after you go through and fix the report dictionaries. All right, let's see what people said. Ooh, we've got a few that haven't used GP, it looks like. Just kidding. Maybe they're just lucky and you should go out and buy a lottery ticket today, because if you haven't experienced a report dictionary error, you are missing out. Okay, so next, what does it look like to move to Business Central? And I'm going to kind of go off script here a little bit and just say that being a lifelong GP consultant and making your career off of something like GP, I didn't take too kindly to the announcement, even though I knew it was coming. But I will say over the last month and the last couple of weeks, I've been fortunate enough to be at some events that have really gotten me excited about what Business Central is going to have to offer for myself and our customers. Namely, just this last week, we were able to be at a leadership event, and I was able to watch Scott Verpeer work his magic with Copilot. And I'm super excited for you guys to see how that's going to work with Business Central and your other Microsoft 365 products. All right, so what does it look like to move to Business Central? Well, here you're on a scalable infrastructure. It's supported and updated operating system, so Microsoft's taking care of the systems that it's on are up to date. You can access it anywhere. I like to tell the customers they could be sipping Mai Tais in Mexico and pop open their iPad or their Surface and see Business Central working on from there. It's secure, so it uses your login plus multi-factor authentication, just like it does to get into your Microsoft 365 stuff. And you don't have access to get into the servers any longer. So it's more secure than it would be with your on-prem solution. It's browser-based. You don't have to do any sort of installation. And kind of mentioned it earlier, but it's endlessly scalable. So if you get to those busy times of the year and you need more bandwidth or more oomph in the system, you can make that happen. Again, same bullet point. We have a great Business Central team here, and I will tell you that a lot of the folks that are working with you on Great Plains have started the process of learning Business Central. So we're going to be able to help you with both Business Central and GP as you transition. It modernizes your solution. You're able to work more seamlessly with Office 365 and the Power Platform, and it has some CRM options within it, whereas GP doesn't have that. And again, I kind of mentioned this, you don't see a Copilot button inside of GP, but you will see that inside of Business Central and your other Microsoft 365 apps. And the nice thing about Business Central is you can control costs with it. So I've helped some people transition from GP where they've actually moved to Business Central, and their annual costs for being on Business Central are less than being on GP. The risks with moving to Business Central, we've talked about these some. So some of the ISVs that you work with right now aren't compatible with it. So we need to make sure that before you transition, we have a plan for that. And there's not a one-to-one feature comparison to GP. We'll go over a slide here at the end where in a couple of weeks, Deb Schaefer is going to be doing a presentation to show you the differences between GP and BC. So most of the options are in BC, it's just a little different. The one thing that is not in Business Central is payroll. So that's something we'll work with you guys on for a transition option in making sure that you can still run your payroll process with Business Central. There are things like Green Shades that work, or Integrity Data that allows you to do payroll, or we've had good luck with folks that migrate to other third-party providers or look locally for a payroll processor to process payroll for them. All right, next we've got another poll, and if you haven't heard of Copilot, you're going to want to, but just a quick question if you have heard of what Copilot is and what it does. All right, we'll kind of, looks like we've got a couple percentage that have answered already. All right, we're about halfway there. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just click next and see where we're at. So yes, most people have heard of it, but there are quite a few that haven't. And I'll just say keep your eye open to the emailings from marketing here and what Stoneridge sends out, because we're giving a lot of information on what Copilot is and how you can take advantage of the power that it provides you guys. All right, what does moving to Business Central look like? So this is kind of in a nutshell what the process is. So first, what we do is we do an assessment of your GP environment. We work with licensing here and the solution architects to take an inventory of what you're using. And then from there, we'll come up and give a custom demo for you of Business Central to kind of mimic how you would work with BC, kind of like you do with GP. Then some more discovery takes place. We create a statement of work and get you a quote so that you know what the cost is going to be to transition from GP to BC. And when you do the transition, it's going to fall into 3 different buckets. The GLAP-AR is a fixed bid financial implementation called our foundation implementation. And from there, you'll be just migrating what most of our GP customers fall into, the GL, AP, and AR. If you got a little bit more than that and you want to transition distributions, we have a package for that too, and that will include the first fixed bid financial plus sales order processing, inventory, and purchase order processing. Now, if you have a lot more moving parts than that and you want to integrate a bunch of information, or if you need extensions with Business Central to accomplish what you're doing in GP, well, that would fall into the 3rd category, where it's a standard proven process implementation of Business Central using our Stoneridge methodology. And I talked a little bit about the assessments up front, but Microsoft does whatever they can to try help keep their customers on a Microsoft product. So there are funding and some promotions available that will work with you up front to just see if you qualify for. All right, next screen. So some of the main differences, again, Deb Schaefer will be covering this in more detail in a few weeks on her demonstration. So BC is a full software as a service ERP system. It's in the cloud. You go to a website to see it, whereas GP is on-prem or hosted by someone for you. Licensing, you use a monthly subscription versus like GP you would with your annual enhancement. And then I skipped the second one, which is probably the most important, where BC uses dimensions versus how GP uses an account string. The dimensions make BC a lot more powerful option, so you can get more out of it with less. There's automatic updates versus the manual updates like GP has. Looks like we have questions on this too, but BC does not have a built-in payroll solution. So we'll work with you guys to find a solution that works for you to replace what you're doing in GP. BC has some CRM features built in. It has a more seamless integration for Office 365 and the Power Platform. And then BC also has AI capabilities in it already, and more get added every release. It's secure and it's easily backed up and accessible from any device. Plus, you also have a development environment available with your subscription to Business Central, so that when these updates do come out, you can test them, make sure they work, and then roll it out to production.